Gather round to dive deep into Phyrexian lore with your next panel hosted by Matt Danner.
Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Matt Danner. I'm a senior creative lead over at Wizards of the Coast. So we've been on Dominaria, right? We've kind of seen the sleeper agents. We know that there's this looming Phyrexian threat, and we've kind of gotten some spoilers over the course of this week and some previews of what Brothers War holds in store of Teferi, looking back in time to see ways to deal with this existential threat. Well, I'm kind of here to talk to you about the very clear and very real danger of Phyrexia, the Phyrexians. And joining me today, I have some very special guests. I have world-famous, esteemed magic artist, Mark Tedin. Also joining me is Grace Fong, our world-building design lead for All Will Be One. To my left, Roy Graham, Magic Story lead. And last but certainly not least, Jay Annelli, consulting lore master and co-host of the Vorthos podcast and author of the upcoming MTG The Visual Guide on sale in December. So let's talk Phyrexians, right? Who are they? Grace, take us through it.
So Matt, the Phyrexians are a society of biomechanical creatures. Basically, they go through the multiverse, find parts, and build other things into themselves. They're recycling friendly. However, they only care about themselves. And that to the point where they're so neutral and so self-interested that their actions are almost always evil.
Almost. Roy, you know a lot about the Phyrexians. Who exactly are they? Take us through it.
Well, you know, there are a lot of things, Danner. The term I've heard that I'm most fond of is that they're a viral civilization. You know, they're infectious, not only physically, obviously, with the oil, but also mentally. They pollute your beliefs, your sort of core personality traits, and make you come around to their way of things.
Yeah. Jay, lore master, you don't just get handed that title. Talk us through Phyrexians.
I was just handed that title. But so the Phyrexians believe that by completing themselves, by fusing themselves with machines, that they can ascend and become higher level beings. They have this sense of manifest destiny that the multiverse belongs to them. And they believe that at the end of this journey, they're going to undergo this grand evolution into perfect beings.
And Mark, you were kind of there at the beginning. Talk us through, who the Phyrexians?
Well, there's an obvious, sort of Giger-esque feeling to them, like the biomechanical combinations of biology and technology.
That melding of the techs, right?
Yeah, the blending of both in a lot of different varieties.
Totally. So we know now kind of who they are. Let's talk a little bit about what it is that they want. Grace, you know a lot about that. Talk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, they want everyone to be one. They replicate themselves amongst other societies, and they do this by infecting them with a substance known as glistening oil. And this oil is so dangerous, it is game over once you've been touched by it. At first, you start thinking like a Phyrexian, like, you know what's cool? And then it actually starts to warp your body to prepare for other Phyrexians to make biomechanical modifications to it. Like, hey, I really could use a third arm. This is great.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. Roy, what is it that they want?
Well, like Grace said, at the end of the day, what they want is for everything to be Phyrexia, right? But there's a little nuance there. I should point out that they're not a hive mind exactly. They don't act as one organism. And because of that, there's some room for infighting. There are kind of competing visions among the Praetors, who we'll talk about in a little bit, as regarding what perfect Phyrexia looks like. There's not a unified vision exactly, but they're all on the same page about Phyrexia being the best way to be. And they're in the business of helping everyone become that. You know, they're like wellness coaches from hell.
Wellness coaches from hell, right. So they're all on the same page as Phyrexia, good, and then, but exactly the nuances of what that means, how you get there, there's a little bit of maybe disagreement.
Right.
Okay, cool. Jay, you know a ton. Phyrexians? What do they want?
So there are 5 different flavors of Phyrexia right now. You've got the white-aligned Phyrexians, the machine orthodoxy, who believe that through unity, they can reach transcendence. They have like a religious cult around it. The progress engine, the blue-aligned Phyrexians, they're more science-focused. They believe that through iteration, they can achieve that perfection that they're looking for. The black-aligned Phyrexians, the steel thanes, believe that they can achieve their dominance over the multiverse through scheming. The red-aligned Phyrexians, they're a little bit more of the traitorous, rebellious kind of Phyrexians. They believe that through destruction, they can purify themselves and become perfect. They just want to be left alone to do that. And then finally, the green-aligned Phyrexians, the vicious swarm, believe that they can achieve that grand evolution I mentioned earlier through predation and survival of the fittest.
Awesome. So that's kind of what they want now. Mark, can you talk us through a little bit about just kind of the original story about the Phyrexians?
Well, early on, with the early Magic cards, a lot of the artists were, we had a very open sort of like interpretation of like, what the cards should be. We just get the title sometimes, very little art description. So we were free to like generate like, as many images as we would all like to do. If you look at like, Priest of Yawgmoth, kind of looks like a robot. Balduvian Conjurer definitely didn't look like, something that the later barbarians, ended up as. But Anson and I were exploring like the more sort of cinematic, look at the time. Because I just picked and choose what sounded good, I ended up with a lot of artifact lore and establishing some of that early stuff. So we had a little bit of a science fiction aesthetic like going on, early on, which actually tailored really nicely into the direction of the Weatherlight saga. The Phyrexians preceded that a little bit, but we were free to explore like the look and feel of the Phyrexians and what their origins were at the very beginning. And in the beginning of this story, like the Phyrexians were sort of reintroduced through Wrath, which was like the stronghold and all the villains and of course all the crew of the Weatherlight. Anson and I like did a lot of the costumes, we did a lot of the world building, and Anthony Waters and I ended up like doing a lot of like the ships during like the eventual war that came about when Urza got like more directly involved. The legacy weapon and of course reusing like the mana rig and those things. But it was it was very self-contained at first, but we were able to sort of like develop it a little bit more. Pete Venner's actually developed like the look of the Weatherlight, and I ended up like doing 2 versions of it afterwards, and so it's really nice to like see an interpretation that sort of encapsulates like both of those at once. But that's just the legacy weapons. The Phyrexians themselves like ended up being a bastardization of like of the mysterious ancient Thran, which Urza and Mishra kind of unearthed all their tech and used it to some like very awful purposes. But anyway, that's sort of like the beginning of it. But Yawgmoth was there, and as someone who came from the Thran, and we just sort of like took it one step further to see like what the ultimate goal of Yawgmoth was.
That's awesome. Like really kind of stood the test of time, right? Like you can see the Weatherlight here, see it brought to life.
Yeah.
In large scale.
Go get a photo.
Yeah, photo up. Jay, we talked a little bit about Urza and Mishra and their meddling in Thrawn tech. Does that have any ramifications? Is that?
So the Phyrexian invasions, we're dealing with new Phyrexia now, right? New implies there's an old Phyrexia, and the old Phyrexia, they started with a not a particularly nice guy, a Thran eugenicist named Yawgmoth, who believed that he could perfect the Thran by fusing them with artifice, with machines. He was helped by a Thran planeswalker named Dyfed, who found the perfect plane of 9 perfect metal spheres for him to continue his research in. and together they built a portal to that plane. The other Thran saw what he was doing and were not particularly enthused. So with the rest of Dominaria, there's sort of a Thran civil war with Yawgmoth's Phyrexians versus the Thran alliance of everyone who is like, these guys don't seem legit. And Yawgmoth ends up getting pushed back through that portal, and it gets locked with a power stone. And for the next 5,000 years, they're stuck behind that portal to Phyrexia, Matt.
A portal to Phyrexia, you say?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, does anybody agree that a panel wouldn't be, let's say, complete without some preview cards? All right. Let's take a look. Let's see if we can get up on the confidence monitors here. But let's take a look at our preview card here. Portal to Phyrexia. This is a 9-drop artifact. When Portal to Phyrexia enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. Okay, that's a good start. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types.
Can I just say also, I love the flavor text for this card. I'm not biased here. I didn't touch that flavor text. I didn't work on it, but it's just so elegant and simple at conveying and promising all manner of horrors just around the corner.
Yeah, the nightmare has returned, right? And so I guess that leads us into our next question. Like, should we be afraid? Like, quick poll, real quick. Like, Mark, should we be afraid of these folks?
Yeah.
Okay.
It looks that way.
Yeah. Okay. Grace?
I mean, if I didn't have to be on this stage, I'd probably be running.
That's fair. Roy?
Yeah.
Okay. Jay, 3 out of 4 panelists agree. Should we be afraid of the Phyrexians?
Well, in my opinion, you can't believe every saga you read, right? Sometimes you just have to embrace the inevitable. And if you don't even realize it's happening, is it really so bad, Matt?
I mean, yes. But
That's just your opinion.
That's fair. We'll turn it back this way. I guess, Grace, should we be afraid? Yes. What makes them scary?
It's kind of, well, apparently I'm scared of a lot of things that Jay's not. For me, it's all about that whole you don't know when they've got you. Like, I mean, as a writer, you're always in your head, right? And as part of the narrative design for New Phyrexia All Be One, we're trying to tap into fear. The fear of our audiences. The fear of the audience in 1996 is going to be different from what audiences fear in 2022. So we're looking at media from back then versus now. And a lot of what made Phyrexian scary in 96 was our relationship to technology. We were afraid of putting our addresses into the internet. Oh man, somebody's gonna come and kidnap me. But now we have drones from Amazon delivering packages to our house. But with the global pandemic, with our increased relationship to technology, we have put more and more of ourselves into the machine. And I personally find that incredibly scary.
Yeah, that loss of self, totally.
Yeah.
Roy, you said yes, afraid. Talk us through it, man. What makes them scary?
For me as a writer, the sort of North Star of Phyrexian horror is body horror. I think that when you're writing a story with that as your kind of anchor, you don't need to update it much across the decades. You know, having a third mechanical arm sprout out of your spine is exactly as scary in 2022 as it would have been in 96. Yeah.
Okay. Jay, imagine for a moment that we should be afraid of them. What is it that would make them scary to you?
So especially with New Phyrexia, the way they infect people is this invisible contagion, and it's so scary. Like, I can see why people would be afraid of it. Did you touch that oil that someone handed you out in the convention center? Did you get infected with that? And that kind of primal fear of that invisible contagion, I can see why people would be afraid.
Oddly specific, but okay, yeah, I can see how you could be afraid of that. Mark, visually, we heard a lot about the story side of things. Visually, how do you convey fear?
Oh, well, when we were exploring, like, the visual aspects of, like, what people could be uncomfortable with, we were looking into, like, we were talking about the body horror aspect of it, something that's insidious, something that could change you. There's all the things that are like, spiky and erupting from your flesh. Those are very obvious ones. So sometimes it's subtle, but sometimes it's not so subtle. You've got like the spikiness of it coming out. Things that are sharp looking, something that is aggressive. If you look at like any land card, you see something that's very placid and very pastoral. It sort of reminds me of your childhood, of like hugs from your mom and things that are comforting. This is the opposite. You've got something that looks sharp, uncomfortable, and in a lot of cases, if you shake someone's hand or you're worried that you're going to get your fingers sliced or pinched. So visually you sort of respond to like, what, you already have at like either your inner sort of lizard brain, like going, that looks uncomfortable, that's going to hurt me. So therefore, we were trying to explore shapes and designs that sort of evoked those feelings.
Right, and there's something about like the twisting of the familiar, the spikifying of the comfort image that makes Phyrexia to me like particularly frightening. The fact that the like mechanical spider horror that they send after you might have like the head of your best friend mounted on top of it is just like the cherry on top of the horror sundae.
Very unsettling.
Yeah, and that's the ideal, right? The completion, the idea of being made part of this Phyrexian force, right? All will be one. Grace, talk us through a little bit about the process of completion.
Okay, so completion is the Phyrexians' term for the process of making somebody one of them. And you could, it is both the process and the state of perfection that has been reached once you're fully integrated. Now, the thing is, almost anybody can be Phyrexianized. Almost anybody can be completed. But Planeswalkers have long had this kind of resistance to it. The Planeswalker spark, being part of the soul, is something that's really immaterial. And when you are a biomechanical civilization sticking metal parts onto people, you usually need something material to stick onto, some organic matter. But as we saw in Neon Kamigawa recently, Jin-Gitaxias, the Praetor, was able to do research on the Kami, these spiritual creatures that inhabit this plane uniquely, to discover how to Phyrexianize that immaterial thing. And if you read the story at mtgstory.com, you actually will be able to see Tamio, our poor unlucky planeswalker, from her perspective, what it is like to now be Phyrexian and have a Phyrexian soul. So basically, Tamio before, she was very family-oriented. She was going across the multiverse, trying to collect stories to bring home to her family, to her kids, to her husband. But now she has an even bigger family, the family of Phyrexia.
Yeah, and we've seen Tamio, but Tamio not the only planeswalker that we've seen fall to kind of Jin-Gitaxias' completion tech. Roy, I guess explain yourself.
Yeah, I feel like I should probably address the big cyborg kitty man in the room. Listen, it hurt me just as much as it hurt all of you to see a Johnny fall to the dark side. And I'm glad that Grace brought up our web fiction, actually, because our authors have really been doing an incredible job bringing alive all these uniquely horrible moments for our characters. If you haven't caught up with mtgstory.com, the Dominaria United last episode has this just really gut-wrenching sequence of Johnny realizing that he's been completed all for months at this point, that he's been working as Shieldred's sleeper agent against his own will, against his own knowledge, just as the modifications burst out from within him. It's a great sequence, really rough. mtgstory.com, please check it out.
So what I'm hearing is that you can check out all of our long-form fiction at mtgstory.com.
That's correct, Matt.
Oh, okay, thanks, bud. And then let's talk, so that's what's going on now with completion. Jay, take us into the Wayback Machine. Talk to us about kind of the history of completion.
So in the past, Phyrexia, because they had that sense of manifest destiny that they were better than everyone else, they reserved completion for true Phyrexians. So they might have grafted some metal parts on a useful tool to use them until they wore out and replace them. But they didn't they didn't really complete people they didn't consider Phyrexians. Nowadays, that's all gone. That was the only safety net you had from Phyrexia back in the day. Nowadays, because it's a contagion, everyone gets it. So they want to complete the multiverse and remake it all in their image. Completion is also a really interesting thing in the history of magic, because the story of completion was one of the things that was used with Krovax, a tragic character from the original Weatherlight saga. So he was actually the first legendary creature to get a second version of himself. And that second version is him having succumbed to Phyresis. And he is now a leader of the Phyrexian armies and the Phyrexian generals. It's just such a great storytelling tool, Matt.
Yeah, and so now it's kind of like anybody's fair game, right? So it's like, who's next? It could be anybody, right? Phyrexia has access to all the planes. They have the tools to complete even the most stalwart of planeswalkers, truly like the keys to the multiverse, right? Phyrexia is kind of this universal villain, not preying on any particular or specific group, right? Like, and all humans kind of respond to what makes them terrifying. It's like no group or plane is truly safe at this point.
It's an equal opportunity contagion, and we're all familiar with that.
An equal opportunity contagion, that's right. And so we talked before a little bit about just the 5 colors of mana. Magic's all about the 5 colors of mana. Each of the Praetors kind of aligned to each of those colors. Let's talk about where they are, what they've been up to, kind of these leaders of each individual faction. Grace, can you talk us through Elishnorn, our white Praetor?
Sure. So when the Phyrexians infected a world known as Mirrodin, this very metallic world, Mirrodin had 5 suns, and each one of these suns was built of a different color of mana. And so Elishnorn rose up under the influence of the white mana. And so she adopted a lot of human, elvish, more organic societies, aspects of religion and culture. So she interpreted Phyrexia as essentially a cult. She's following religious doctrine, making religious doctrine, and cleansing the skin from her subjects to bring them closer to how she sees perfection, which is unity amongst all Phyrexian beings.
And you kind of see that carried out, right? Like you see the dress code here, right? Like it's a lot of white plates and red cloth. Yeah, I'm thinking seeing the color. Cloth. Cloth. So that's what white's up to. We'll talk a little bit about the blue Praetor. Let's talk about Jin-Gitaxias.
Right. As I mentioned, Jin-Gitaxias, his name has so many letters. He was influenced by the blue mana in the blue sun. And so this drove him to look for things with knowledge. His whole method of Phyrexianization is based on research. So he grabs everything he can, he experiments on it, he improves it. He's like, no, this spine's not good enough. I'll add a bigger one. And that's why he was the one who was able to complete the Planeswalkers. He's actually also the one who made the glistening oil so effective to begin with.
Yeah, and we're seeing some amazing art up on the screens right now. Original concept art from Richard Witters. It's really phenomenal. We'll move to black. Let's talk, Roy, you want to take Children?
Jay, you have any interest in discussing, sleeper agents, black Phyrexia, all?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, I'll take it. Yeah.
Thanks, bud.
So Shieldred is the foremost of the Steel Thanes, which are sort of barons of the dross pits on New Phyrexia. And her sort of core philosophy is probably the closest to old Phyrexia out of all the Praetors. At the end of the day, Childred is about power and acquiring it by any means necessary. And one of her favorite means of acquiring power is via sleeper agents. The completed residents of a plane that won't even know that they're tools in her arsenal until she seeks to activate them. And she loves the not only the placement of sleeper agents in key positions of power, but also the paranoia and xenophobia and fear that this creates, which is something that we tried to hit on a lot in the Dominaria United story. And before we move on to the Red Praetor, I also wanted to just say, as the story lead, that we had our fun with the sort of who's the traitor story. Sleeper agents are, in the lore, really a tool of Shieldred, for New Phyrexia at least. And so I wouldn't worry too much about who's secretly Phyrexianized. We have plenty of other surprises in store for you.
It's a good call out. It's a good call out. Jay, you didn't get to talk Shieldred, so let's talk Urabrask. Going to talk about tell folks about the Red Praetor.
So the Red Praetor, Urabrask, of the Quiet Furnace, like I said before, they're the most traitorous, rebellious of the Phyrexians. Red tends to be the most poor match for Phyrexia. They tend to be independent. They just want to be left alone to do their work. It's how the Mirren resistance has managed to survive this long. They just kind of hide away in there like cowards in his furnace lair, and he just doesn't do anything about it. And I don't know if it's really compassion that drives him to spare their puny lives, but it's more like indifference.
Well, I do think it looks pretty hot.
Awesome. Roy, talk us through the Praetor that represents the greatest color in mana, green.
I got to be honest, Danner, Vorinclex has a special place in my heart. He's not into theorizing and philosophizing and evangelizing and all this stuff that the other Praetors are up to. He lets his actions speak for themselves, and his actions are mostly killing and maiming and eating things. But no, I love the straightforwardness of Vorinclex. I love the kind of Darwinian approach to Phyrexian supremacy, right? The idea that he doesn't need to make Phyrexia win. He doesn't need to push his own philosophy. His philosophy is survival of the fittest, and he's pretty sure Phyrexia is the fittest, so it's going to come out on top.
Well, I don't think bear repellent is going to work on him.
Yeah, bear repellent.
I don't think so.
Probably not going to cut it. No. So okay. So that's it. So that's who these folks are. That's what they want. It's how they get you. It's how they're organized. Jay, can we talk a little bit about not just when they come for the individual, because that's kind of how it used to go. We saw that with Provax, but nowadays, the stakes are higher. What do we do when they come for your world?
So we had a whole story about how a Phyrexian invasion goes in the past. I talked a little bit about that Thran Civil War and how they got locked away behind that portal to Phyrexia. Well, the Brothers' War, one of the inciting events, is that Power Stone that had sealed the gateway to Phyrexia. The brothers both go to touch it at the same time, and it shatters into two halves, the Might Stone and the Weak Stone. And they war over it for years, not realizing that they've reopened the door to Phyrexia, and that the Phyrexian Praetor Gix, and this is old school Praetor, not the modern kind of Praetor, had been manipulating them and the war the entire time. This culminates on Argoth, where Urza realizes his brother Mishra has been completed and is just completely gone, and it breaks his heart, and he activates the Silex, and it detonates and ushers in this ice age that, and by the way, if you don't know what the Ice Age is, ask your dad, and kind of locks Dominaria away from the Phyrexians again for a while. So Urza and Phyrexia have this Cold War out in the multiverse that finally heats up when the snows melt at the end of the Ice Age. The Phyrexians launch their actual full-scale invasion of Dominaria, and Urza, along with the crew of the Weatherlight, and a group of artifacts he's gathered called the Legacy, their last-ditch effort is Urza detonating what's called the Legacy weapon. And it annihilates Yawgmoth, all of the random Phyrexians that are around. Most of them fall over and die because their god has been defeated. And that's the end of the story, and everything's happily ever after.
Oh, great.
No, but in reality, Karn ascends as a planeswalker in the Blast. He fuses with the Might Stone and Weak Stone, and he creates his own plane, a perfect metal sphere called Mirrodin. Well, he called it Argentum. and then someone went crazy. But we won't get into all that. Do you have another hour? So what he doesn't realize is that he's actually brought some of the glistening oil to his new metal plane. And in the core of Mirrodin, the new Phyrexians are growing and changing. And eventually, when the mending happens and he loses his spark and flings himself to Mirrodin to what he thinks is safety, he's captured by these new Phyrexians in the core and kind of made their leader. It's a weird situation. Years later, Elspeth, Koth, and Venser all go on a mission to find him to try and help defeat this growing new Phyrexian threat. And ultimately, in order to cure him of his phyresis, Venser has to sacrifice his spark, who's been immunized by one of the Mirrans who has that power, and Karn is purified, and that's kind of where we catch up with them.
Okay, so hopefully you caught all that. That's about 25 plus years of Magic lore. About 5 minutes, so we're good, right? We're up to speed?
Yeah, nothing bad ever happens in Magic. So no, there's actually, as you all might know now, a new Phyrexian invasion going on around the multiverse. We've seen Vorinclex on Kaldheim take a sample of the sap of the World Tree. We have seen Jin Gataxias learn how to complete planeswalkers without losing their planeswalker spark in the process on Kamigawa. On New Capenna, Urabrask has discovered Halo, a weapon that was used against Phyrexians in the past. And on Dominaria United, Sheoldred has destroyed or removed everything that helped defeat Phyrexia the first time around, so that there's no weapon left out there that any of those, puny resistance people can use against them.
And before we get too off the subject of New Phyrexia, just because you mentioned what had kind of been done to the world of Argentum/Mirrodin, we have a lot of really exciting story stuff coming along the pipe, but something that I wanted to mention as a really exciting aspect of it was obviously New Phyrexia, chock full of horrors these days, but the place itself is kind of malevolent. It's got a bit of an evil to it that threatens our heroes just for being present in the environment.
Yeah,
And
what you got there, Jay?
What? I'm sorry. Oh. Yeah, these are just some nice new eye drops this lady gave me. She was dressed all in white, asked me to call her mommy or something like that. And I found ever since I've started using them, I can just see so much more clearly than I used to. You guys want some? Grace?
I've had LASIK. I think I'm okay.
Yeah. Okay. So much.
I'll get you later.
Thanks for offering to share. It's much appreciated. So much of Magic is this idea of going to these new planes or returning to planes that we've seen before, but perpetually reimagining them. I guess, Mark, can you talk to us a little bit how does it feel to know that something that you created almost 3 decades ago is still inspiring new worlds, new story arcs, both and our fans, right? So you're inspiring not just the creative, but also just the entire fandom.
Years. I mean, God, that's amazing. I mean, a lot of the early artists who just were kind of flying by the seat of our pants, painting the early cards. That was really interesting to get into and develop the world more broadly. And now, through the concept pushes and developing the look and feel more specifically, it's a real treat to watch that just sort of take on a life of its own. So much after those original concept art pushes. But yeah, it's been a really, really interesting, good ride, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future.
Yeah, it's super cool to see it evolve.
Yeah,
super
watch
cool.
Watch it develop like a dark, spiky flower.
How lovely. All right. So that takes us through the lore panel section. But before we get to Q&A, let's do some more preview cards, yeah? Love to hear it. Okay. So I believe the first one that we have, and let me know if it shows up on the screen there, I believe is Gix Yawgmoth Praetor. So this is a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor to Yawgmoth, the father of machines. But it says, whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, draw a card. And then, for the low cost of 4 and triple black, you can discard X cards to exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. So this is pretty powerful. You got a 3-mana 3/3 Phyrexian Praetor right off the gut, and you kind of get that. There's the callback to Phyrexian Arena, right, where you like the pay a life, draw a card. So and then you have the other option there where you're discarding those cards, exiling the top cards of their things, and then just windmill slamming them right into play. So this is Gix, Yawgmoth Praetor, pretty exciting. Next up, we have a reprint. We have Diabolic Intent. 1 black sorcery as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, and then shuffle. This has some pretty great flavor text on it. Gix pierced his disciples' minds and savored their experiences as he took in their knowledge. And as you can see from the art, that is literally pierced. That is not, yeah.
I hate it when my boss does this.
Yeah. Sounds terrible. And then last but not least, we have a new card with amazing art by Dominic Meyer called Visions of Phyrexia. This is 2 and 2 red for an enchantment that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. And then, at the beginning of your end step, if you didn't play a card from exile this way, you create a tapped Power Stone token. So Power Stones we saw with the Karn Planeswalker and Dominaria. These are artifact tokens that say tap to add 1 colorless mana, and the mana can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. It's a flavor knockout. Jay's nodding his head. Power Stones are used to power artifacts.
So
How am I doing?
This is actually the moment where the brothers both touch the Power Stone, and it splits, and both of them, there's like this explosion, and both of them have these like fever dreams of Phyrexia, or the time of the Thran and the Thran Civil War. And they both take very different messages from what they end up seeing, which is why you see kind of this huge split here between them. One of them sees just like fire and burning and, oh, this is terrible. And the other just kind of sees a dark, haunting beauty. And I think you can guess which one is which based on how they end up. One of them makes the right decision and is destroyed for it.
Poor kids.
That's right. So that takes us through our card previews in the scripted portion of this. We'll move into the Q&A, and I have this quick blurb to read. So welcome, everybody. We're so excited to have you here, and we know that you're excited to ask some more from our panel. We want to answer as many questions as possible, so we'll ask that you please keep your questions brief, and please keep them related to the topic of the panel. Now, for our part, we'll try and answer as much as possible and as briefly as possible to get through as much of the line as possible. And there may be some things that we can't say, Roy. But anyway, please excuse us if we do have to be a bit cagey. Without further ado, I'll take this first awesome costume. Please step on up to the mic. And you'll probably have to get kind of close to it just so we can hear you. And then I'll repeat the question just in case we don't hear it. So.
Okay, thank you very much for all your work. This has been amazing. Okay, can Eldrazi's be completed? And in a clash between these two, who will win?
Sorry, it is very difficult to hear your question on stage. Can you just step a little bit closer to the mic for me?
So can Eldrazi's be completed? And in a clash between these two races, who will win?
Oh boy, so I think the question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it is, I'm gonna come down there. It's totally unscripted. This is fun, coming on down.
Thanks, Matt.
Our fearless leader.
Phyrexians versus Eldrazi's. Who will win? And can they be completed?
Oh, Phyrexians versus...
Eldrazi's.
Oh, Phyrexians versus Eldrazi's, and can they be completed? That's a terrifying thought. So that's, boy, how do we answer this one?
Well, no one's tried it on either side yet.
Yes.
I think if I was just spitballing,
yeah, let's
I'd
go. Let's do that.
The drones that you see of the Eldrazi are not actually their bodies and don't contain souls to be removed and changed.
Yeah.
Right?
There's this really cool moment where Jace is talking to Ugin, right? And Ugin is trying to warn Jace, like, don't try to kill the Eldrazi. Like, you don't understand quite what you're trifling with, right? He describes them as kind of, it's like the finger in the fishbowl. Like, what you see of the Eldrazi is this just a manifestation of this potentially much more larger cosmic entity, and that's why Ugin and Soren and Nahiri back in the day chose to contain them rather than destroy them entirely. So who is more powerful, the Eldrazi or the Phyrexians? I guess they kind of play in different spheres, right? They're kind of on different battlefields. The Eldrazi are these kind of inscrutable, larger-than-life cosmic entities.
Forces of nature.
Truly, these primordial forces of nature. And the Phyrexians are much more interested in kind of the
nitty-gritty.
The biological, the nitty-gritty of the universe. So who would win?
I think the real answer is everyone loses.
Everybody loses in that one.
That's pretty fair. It's kind of, you know, if I had to wager a guess, I would just say probably the Eldrazi, given that they can kind of take away the playthings that the Phyrexians would use, but the Phyrexians are pretty resourceful and can use just about everything. So it's like a weird, terrible draw for everyone. Anyway, thank you so much for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Urza.
Thanks, Urza.
Hello.
You gotta get way closer than you even think.
Does that sound good?
I can hear you.
Okay,
yeah, that's great.
Cool. Hi. So my question is kind of a little tricky to express, but I'll try my best. So my question is, okay. So if we know that completion mostly comes about through, like, the mental part of completion mostly comes about through infection with the glistening oil, and we know that at the present moment, the Phyrexians know how to complete souls, as is seen in the Planeswalkers they've completed. Theoretically, based on what we've seen it do in the past, would it be possible for the Cauldron of Eternity to cure completion? Question mark?
That is a very interesting question.
Do you want to repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is, simply put, would it be possible for the Cauldron of Eternity to cure completion? Good luck finding it is one answer to that. But, I mean, theoretically, we've seen it cure the curse of the Chain Veil that plagued green-black Garruk since, like, his inception, basically. Could it cure completion? I mean, we've seen things that can fight back against completion. We've seen, like, the Sarah's Realm Power Stone in the Weatherlight kind of hold back it from getting completed for a while. I think it might be possible, but I don't know if it's something that's going to ever come up.
Awesome. Good question. Anyway,
Yep.
Great. Hello.
Hello. This is from the number 3 Phyrexian enjoyer of the people I know. So, can we expect or look forward to exploring Phyrexians more domestically and culturally in a non-antagonistic role in the future, such as Red Phyrexians or the Full Art Mox Opal?
In the next set, we're going to finally be able to see, like, this is going to be a great chance, new Phyrexia All-Be-One, to view Phyrexia from their own point of view. And they are actually generally pretty antagonistic with each other because they are all have these conflict. Although they are united by the perspective of everything should be Phyrexia, they're still a new society. They're still trying to like win out each other ideologically. So, but there will be a lot of cards and world building material that'll show you what it is like to be a Phyrexian who participates in that subsection of Phyrexian society. We spent a lot of time in the world building thinking, hey, this is the first time that they've had their own plane. What are they gonna do? Now that they have all these resources, they've become more intelligent. They've become, like, rather than random metal parts sticking all over, how are they gonna organize? How are they going to express who they are based off of the influences that they've absorbed in their short time?
What's their cuisine like? You know, what restaurants would they go to?
Oily.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Happy to go back to my original plane finally. I'm not sure if you can answer these questions as you stated earlier, because it may be relating to future content to be released. Is there going to be an art book for Phyrexia, and is there going to be a Dungeons & Dragons plane shift for Phyrexia, like for
I can't speak about future products. I can give the... here's what I can tell you. I can say, is that something that you would like to see, and can I take that feedback back to HQ with me?
Yes, very much. There was one for Innistrad and Kaladesh, and then they went silent. And Phyrexia just came out later.
I will say there is quite a few full-page spreads for new Phyrexia in Magic the Gathering, the visual guide, coming out this December, written by some guy named Annelli. There might be some good stuff in there if you're a Phyrexian enjoyer.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the question.
So you guys mentioned the lore and the stories of Dominaria United. One of those short stories was about Squee the Goblin and how he was able to uncomplete himself by blowing himself up. Are there other entities like that, and will that be explored in future sets?
So without, it would be easy for me to trip over a bunch of spoilers answering this question. So I'm going to do my best to be both vague and still informative and not super evasive. Yes.
Go on. Okay.
Thank you.
Dan Sheehan did such a great job with that story. Oh
totally.
Hello. How's it going? So I have a fun question for everybody.
Oh.
You have to invite one of the Praetors to tabletop game night. Who is joining your D&D party?
Oh, so
I didn't hear the question.
So I believe the question is, you're inviting one of the Praetors to your D&D game night, as a player or to DM?
As a player.
As a player. Okay, so we can go round table with this one real quick. Who and why?
The spikiest looking one, I think, for me. Something that is the most crab-like.
Vorinclex, because I identify with his need to eat everything in sight.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Vorinclex because you expect him to bring snacks, right? Like,
man, I think Jin Gataxias would be able to explain the rules best to me if I like needed a reference. So
that would be my pick.
I would say Urabrask because none of my players ever show up anyway. So I'm pretty sure he would just ghost me.
I love it. I love that we've got the D&D magic fusion going on here. Awesome. Thank you so much for the question. Who would you bring?
Yes, author of our Crimson Vow and Midnight Hunt stories, K. Arsenault Rivera. Who would you pick?
Why you gotta blow up my spot like that?
Remember those authors I said that were doing such an awesome job?
I would bring... See, I didn't think of an answer to this. I think Vorinclex is a good pick for snacks. I would not invite Jin Gataxias because I do not want to be lectured about rules. I think Urabrask would probably be the chillest, though.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So we know what Shieldred has been up to, but what about the other Steel Thanes like Geth, Azaxazog, or Roxa?
Oh, the other Steel Thanes. Is that, wow. Now I leaned in on Roy. Go ahead, Grace.
You leaned in on Roy.
Tell him.
Well, there are a lot of things that we can't tell you right now, but given that we will be visiting New Phyrexia soon, if you, I'm going to plug again, if you follow mtgstory.com, you will actually be able, we have tried to make our return one that will reference a lot of things that you're familiar with, answer questions, and raise new ones. So we're trying to make this satisfying for people to see their old favorite enemies and heroes again.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Great shirt, by the way.
Hi, Can you tell us what happened to the five sons on Mirren?
The 5 sons of Mirrodin?
Yeah.
Can we tell you what happened? Yeah, we can tell.
I think we're allowed. I mean, they're...
Well, there were 5 sons.
They're in the art that's been shown.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, great.
Cool. Yeah, they're now the 5 sons
They're
of
still there?
They're still the 5 sons of New Phyrexia.
Yeah, just a name change, but the cosmic entities of the 5 sons are still there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any intention on releasing like a linguistic guide to the Phyrexian language?
Is there any intention to... ready for a very cagey answer?
Yeah.
Is that something you would like to see?
Yes.
I will take that overwhelming amount of applause as overwhelming support for such an item. I'll see what I can do for you.
Who would have guessed that attendance of a Phyrexian lore panel might be interested in such a thing?
It's weird.
How about that?
Okay. All right. So old Phyrexia was focused mostly on like a mono black, and when they moved over to Argenta and they became new Phyrexia, we went to the 5 colors. Has there been any serious design into possibly a colorless faction of Phyrexia?
Oh, a colorless faction of
I'm not going to really go into the mechanical details here, but the influence of the 5 sons is not like particularly unique, and as the Phyrexians have grown as their own civilization, just as we have like mixed civilizations here in the real world, we have gone like and tried to really flesh out the different possibilities in terms of like just going beyond what we've seen before.
All right. Yeah. There it is.
Hello, thanks for the panel. So my question is essentially, we're seeing Gix show up in the Brothers' War and a lot of influence by him, but we seem to be lacking in a certain Dark Father's influence, and kind of wondering where it is going on with him.
Sorry, I caught the first part.
Is the question about what Yawgmoth's up to
Yeah.
in the Brothers' War? Yeah, okay.
Totally, yeah.
So I believe, if I remember correctly, and I have read these books a lot, but I haven't read them in a minute, Yawgmoth goes through like long periods of hibernation, and so Gix kind of got to do his own thing during the Brothers' War, and when Yawgmoth wakes up and learns Gix failed, it doesn't go well for Gix later on in the story. So right now Yawgmoth, I think, is in one of those periods of slumber, so he's not going to be coming through, or... Yawgmoth is dead, let's be clear. Yawgmoth is dead. And there's no time travel shenanigans that are going to involve him, because I know that's where some of these questions will go. But Yawgmoth at this point in the story, in the timeline, is probably one of those periods of slumber.
Okay, thanks.
In the core, becoming a big gas god.
Hello.
Hello.
So many questions, only one.
Oh yeah, get in there. There you go.
So my question is rooted in the future and also in the past, and it concerns a Johnny. My question is, and I know this is probably going to result in a cagey answer, when was he turned?
Ooh.
We can give you a range.
Yeah, the story deliberately. I mean, we've talked about this to make sure that we knew that where there was a point, but we left a few clues on when it happened. If you're wondering when he talked to Elspeth in New Capenna, was he turned? And I think the answer to that is no. But by episode 3 of Dominaria United, I think, there's a moment that makes it very clear. He does a big open-toothed smile, which the old Ajani would never have done, and by that point, it's pretty clear that he's been turned.
Wait, in the Dominaria story?
Dominaria United on mtgstory.com.
At mtgstory.com. Wow.
Yeah.
Would you also say that the amazing Miguel Lopez stories are up for Brothers War on
They are also on
mtgstory.com? Wow, what a good read.
If you haven't read the stories from Miguel Lopez and Reinhard Suarez right now, which are the present and past tracks for the Brothers War story, please do yourself a favor and go read them. They are amazing. Oh, that's a great question. You can read them at...
So the question is, where should we go read them?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you can read them at mtgstory.com. Once again, that's mtgstory.com. Thanks so much for your question, man.
Thank you.
Are we ever going to find out what happened with Glissa?
Are we ever going to...
Glissa was not dead when we left New Phyrexia the last time. I think that's the only answer you're going to get today. Sorry.
Thank you.
We may see some returning favorites.
I mean, technically she was dead because she's a zombie now, but she was still moving around.
It got better. Step right up, man. Oh, hang on. Give us just 1 second. Okay, fire.
Technical question. Is there a difference between Phyrexianization or phyresis and completion and being completed? Or are they just two words for the same process?
We've discussed this a lot, and they're all kind of interchangeable terms. Phyrexianization is an easier term for people who are not like hardcore Vorthos, the term for big Magic story fans. That makes it a little more clear what it is. Phyresis is the process of becoming a Phyrexian. Completion is like getting the metal fused within you. And you know, if you buy a book called Magic the Gathering, The Visual Guide by Jay Annelli, there might be a whole thread devoted to completion and phyresis. I don't know.
On sale
I
at
just
fine
heard.
booksellers near you. Yeah.
And follow-up question, where can I read the story of Magic the Gathering?
That's great. Story for Magic the Gathering can be read at mtgstory.com.
Grace, can you hit this one out?
Oh, yeah, actually.
Oh, yeah, I think it's at mtgstory.com.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Cool.
So I'd like to prelude this question with a statement from my brother, which is complete Teferi, cowards. And then follow it with, if you were to complete a Planeswalker, who would you complete?
I'm not going to answer that because Roy's sitting right here, and I've learned not to tell him who my favorite characters are.
Our nickname for Roy is Roy Blood for the Blood God Graham.
Yeah, you've gotten some cagey answers today. You're probably going to get another one here because if we say who our favorite Planeswalker is in front of this guy, it doesn't end well for them. So, yeah. That said, who would I complete?
Gosh.
I'm-
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, like, if I were a Phyrexian, I would want whoever's the most powerful, right? So maybe like, I don't know. If it was Liliana, I feel it'd be a pretty easy task. And then you have all these zombie bodies that you could just readily turn into additional armies.
Lots of resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. See that.
I'd like to unearth Domri Rage and just bring him back as a horrible zombie.
I was actually thinking, like, who's got awesome armor that would look cool, spiky? Like, if we're bringing people back, right? Like
Mohawk that's just wires.
yeah. We bring Gideon back and just see that armor and like the spiked circle.
I changed my answer. I want to see Dak Faden again. I don't care how. You
Bring
can't
back,
kill him twice.
You've heard it here first. Bring back Dak.
Urza only stuck his toe in a little bit before his head got cut off, and it would be. I think it would have been interesting to see, like, what if they took that all the way?
Just the completed head.
Completed head.
It's just spider head
with a bunch
Urza.
of wires coming out of the neck. I don't know.
And that is how you craft some of the most disturbing visual images that Magic has ever seen. Thank you so much, Mark. Yeah, right there. How about you, bud? Who do you want to see?
Teferi.
Copy that. Hello.
Hi. So in the new Capenna story, we caught wind of Urabrask, who was organizing a revolution with both the Mirrans and the rebel Phyrexians. So my question is, in the future, will we see more Phyrexians carving their own paths in life, breaking away from Yawgmoth's will, and maybe creating their own society away from those oppressive standards?
I mean, we have 5 seconds left, and so in that time, I think it's fair to say.
Check
So
out
the
our
answer
next
Awesome.
Oh,
Hey,
and that's time up.
Did
Did you want this back?
That is that is actually time. We got to cut it here. Thank you all so very much. If you were unable to answer a question and still want to, we will be here in the hall. Come and find us. We're not shy. Thank you so very much, Magic fans. And be sure to stick around for the next panel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Happy Magic 30.